So does that mean with this new account 3 and with our account 1 contribution going up from 70% to 75%, from a retirement funding standpoint, we are actually better off than before?
Yeah.
Wow, that's surprising.
Hi, I'm Hardish.
And I'm Aaron.
And this is the Economy Rise podcast.
Want to understand complex economic jargon? We're here to help simplify it for you.
And that's in line with our tagline, which is to discover the economist in you. So Aaron, today we're going to go into a topic which I think a lot of people are actually talking about, which is the EPF Account 3, right?
Right.
So, but for the purpose of our viewers, I will maybe explain why we want to talk about this so there's no lack of coverage on this. Like every media title has carried this. There's a lot of comments about it.
Right.
And a lot of our friends in the podcast industry also have covered it, right? But even so, I think that when I look at it, right, I think that there are some conversations that are missing out on some certain key issues. And secondly, also, I think there's an interest in us maybe trying to speculate why this is happening.
Okay.
Right? So we're going to get into that. So if you stay on, we will actually cover that as well. So for a start, maybe we just go through the top line stuff, right? What we already know, okay? So what we already know is that there are going to be 3 accounts moving forward. Prior to this, there was 2 accounts. Every time you do what is called a charoman, right? Your contribution to EPF is broken into 2 accounts, which is 70 and 30. So the new account is going to be moving forward, right? It's going to be 75, 15, 10, right? So basically, there's this new account, which is account 3. So the first thing I wanted to cover is that when you read a lot of the sort of news online and even some of the chatter that we've been looking at, right, there is first of all this misconception. I will label it as misconception that is driven by this particular word that's been thrown around, which is opt-in.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Sure.
So I'm just curious, like, what do you know about this opt-in? I mean, I don't know whether you have been paying attention to some of this, but there's this idea of an opt-in, right, for this account 3.
Well, okay, I think it's quite important to make the distinction here. Right? A lot of the initial assumption for the opt-in option was that we would be allowed to choose whether or not we want to have the account 3 or not.
Yeah.
Right, because some parts of society actually would prefer not to have it. So
Yes.
that was the initial assumption.
Yes.
But now it seems that the opt-in is not about whether or not you want an account 3,
Yes.
but something else completely separately.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, typical, right? Sometimes when you put out messaging, people read it in different ways, right? So it's not an opt-in. It's a you don't get to opt in, you don't get to opt out. According to the EPF statement, so I'm referring to the statement that they put out, right? Which is the most official point to refer to, right?
Right.
So beginning from contributions from 11th May onwards, which actually means your contribution next month, because contributions go in by the 15th of every month. So, right? So basically your contribution that you're paying in on May onwards will automatically be divided into 3 accounts.
Right.
You don't have a choice in this. The way it's worded is very clear. You don't have a choice in this. The opt-in, and maybe it's a poor choice of word, is actually an option that now that you have this third account, you have the option of transferring some of your existing balance in your current account 2 to account 3 to set it up, right? But moving forward, every time you do a contribution, it's going to be broken up into this 75, 15, 10, right? So you will always have this third account, right? So that's the first thing. So I feel that...
So do you want to share your own personal feelings about it?
I mean, okay, so personal feelings is like, the fact is that it's going to be done anyway, right?
Okay.
I mean, so like, it's going to be there. And I think that is where we want to get into the second part, which is like what it actually means to the rest of us, right?
Right.
Which I think is a bigger conversation to have. But I feel like this is where a lot of people who, naturally we expect a lot of people are going to talk about this, but then they don't actually realize what it's actually referring to. And to be fair to EPF, if you look at their release, they actually use the word option, right?
Right. Okay.
And then in the second, I think a paragraph below, they say that you can opt in.
Right.
But people are picking this opt-in and I think misunderstanding that you can choose to have this account 3 or not.
Yeah. I think to be fair, we could also say part of it is our fault for misunderstanding. Right?
Yeah. So this is about the classic that, not going below the headlines, right?
Right.
So that is a starting point, right? Very quickly, there was this poll by The Star. So they said that they polled about 6,000 readers, right? And I don't know what the exact question was because I only saw the reporting on the poll. I didn't take part in the poll. But it says that they asked people whether they want this opt-in or not. So we don't know what people understood about this term opt-in, but essentially it's split. 45% said they won't opt in, and about 43% said they will opt in.
Right.
So, I mean, in the scale of things, pretty much almost equal, right?
Yeah, right.
And I think about the balance, close to 10% say they are unsure. Well, if you're unsure, it's going to be done for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Regardless, it's going to be done for you, right? So,
but it's still like a 50-50 rough split.
Yeah. So, I mean, before we go into the next part, what do you think of that? Any thoughts on that? What do you feel about this account 3 on a personal basis first, before we go into the actually talking about it?
Personal basis. Okay, honestly, right, I am not really partial about it. Right? I mean, it definitely will help some people, right? And for the people who it won't help, they have a choice, right? I mean, of course, yes, they are forced to take account 3, but I think last I heard, in fact, it's the Star article that actually said that it will be the same rate as the account 1 and 2, right? So you're basically getting the same dividend rate. And the way EPF actually gives you that dividend rate in a very liquid account is by subsidizing it from the account 1 and 2 contributions.
Okay, so we are actually now going to analyzing it. So let's go into it. So the second thing is that we're talking about the online chatter, right? So the online chatter, another big theme is that will we get the same dividends, right? Which everyone right now is kind of pretty much mentally, we've set it to be between 5 to 5.5%, right? I mean, that is the benchmark that EPF has. They have not set it for themselves, but just because of history, right, or recent history, we have all sort of comfortably settled at that expectation, right? I'm talking about us as people, right? So one of the questions was that when you have this account 3, which importantly allows you to actually withdraw it at any time from this account 3, right? The question is that what is the dividend rate? And the only reference I could find was that there was a social media post and there was a reply from someone from EPF that said that the dividend rate will be the same.
This was the one with the official EPF Twitter account, right?
Yeah. I can't remember Twitter or Instagram, but it was an official response by EPF, right?
Right.
And the answer was that it will be the same rate. Right. But they also did caveat that, it could change, right?
Yeah,
and
because it's a dividend.
Yeah, because it's a dividend, right?
Yeah.
So
it's not interest rate.
So that's the second thing, which I think there are implications, right? So if they are going to maintain the same dividend, we want to go a little bit more into the functionality of that. Like, how does a fund provide that for an account that is is so liquid, right?
The idea is basically that account 3 is now much more liquid, but it's getting the same rate, right? So if you compare to your typical FDs, it's like, 3% right now?
Yeah.
And this one is offering substantially more.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, that's not going to be great for the deposit-taking sector. Right?
Yes.
I think Versa just came out with a news that they're raising their rate by 1%.
Yeah. So I saw an ad.
Yeah.
Someone said that it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
But you also said that the news of this EPF has been around for a while as well about this account 3, right? But yes, I mean, so I think Versa right now is offering an additional 1%.
So it's 4%.
So it's I think I can't remember the exact amount, but your money market right now is typically about 3.5 to 3.8, 3.9.
Correct.
They are offering an additional 1%, right?
Right.
Right. So
okay. So it's close to 5, right?
Yeah. So it's close to 5.
Okay. Yeah, so back to your question, the way they would do it, as I alluded to earlier, was that they will be subsidizing the account 3 amounts, let's call it the yield, right? From the amounts in account 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So your total investments attributable to account 1 and 2 will be partly subsidizing the yield for the investments attributable to account 3.
Right.
And the reason they can do that is because account 3 is only 10% of right? Your total is not that big.
Yeah.
So there's an ability to subsidize a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I want to get into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
But I just want to finish off some of these general questions that are out there.
Right.
The second one is that EPF has now broken this account into 3 accounts.
Right.
Just as we've established before, you don't have a choice. It's going to happen whether you like it or not, right? The idea is that, will we suffer in terms of our retirement? And actually, I think what EPF has done here is something that is kind of creative because even though they've broken up into 3 accounts, your account 1, which just to reiterate, in case anyone has lost a point, your account 1 you cannot touch at all under any circumstances, except for maybe like death and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
You cannot touch.
Retirement.
Yeah, you cannot. And if you voluntarily retire, right?
Okay.
You cannot touch it until retirement, right? Until you're 55. So prior to this account 2, you can you can tap into it under specific circumstances like housing loan, education loan, and stuff like that. which I myself have done. But account one now goes from 70% to 75%.
Okay.
So you're actually getting an additional 5% allocation every month into account one, which in fact actually has the effect of accumulating at a faster rate, right? You're contributing extra 5% into your retirement fund.
Okay.
So I think because the reason I'm saying this is because we're going to get into trying to understand the implications of all of this.
Right.
And part of the chatter also is that this is going to hurt retirement. Well, actually, especially on retirement, it actually doesn't really do that because you are going to be accumulating at a faster rate, right? The additional 5%, right? From 70%, it's now 75%.
So what it's really taking is from account 2, is that correct?
Yeah, so account 2 basically, which used to be 30%, is now going to be broken further, right?
Right.
And that was a portion that you could always tap onto anyway. But a smaller portion of the account 2, now you can tap on at any time. That's basically the way to think about it.
Okay, so let me summarize. Basically, you are saying that if your concern is not enough retirement funds, that's actually incorrect. It's actually better for you, right?
Yes.
Because it's moved up, the account 1 has moved up from 70% to 75%.
Yeah.
And the former account 2 is just being broken down into account 2 and 3.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Right.
So you have less money for buying a house and stuff like that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you could say that.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but this argument stands especially for retirement.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, not
yes.
for liquidity.
Because that's what everyone is mostly angry about, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
right.
it's not, people aren't really angry about the lower ability to buy a house.
Yeah.
Right?
So what does it say about our ability to make critical assessments?
I think the fault really lies on both sides, if
Okay.
you really want to allocate blame.
Okay. Well, we are not here to allocate blame.
Yeah.
We're just here to, as we say, right, just to shed
Inform,
light
yes.
and inform. But this is not us. This part, we are not speculating. This is exactly what it says on the press release.
Right.
Maybe do yourself a favor. You're all members of EPF. Sure, you can read all the online news, but you can also go to EPF's website and read it from the source, right?
Right.
Okay. The next point I wanted to bring up was that now coming back to account 3, right? The new account 3. So there is an idea that for anyone who wants to, they can withdraw this at any point, right? So this is basically the first time EPF is offering a liquid account, right? That is what it is. It's a liquid account. It doesn't say what the transaction time is and stuff like that. I imagine maybe, I'm just going to guess, maybe 2-3 days you get it in. If you do a withdrawal, you get it in your account, right? But basically it's a liquid account, right? So the idea is that people are saying that you could actually use this as a facility, right, to put in money and take it out. There's a second, I think, misconception as well, because you can't decide how to break up your contribution. Whatever contribution you put in, it is ultimately broken up into these 3 categories, right?
Right.
So even if you do the voluntary contribution, you max it out as really 100,000 a year, right?
Okay.
Okay, it's only 10,000 that goes into your account 3.
Okay.
Right? Because that is what it is, right?
Okay, so this is the part I myself didn't understand earlier.
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
I think what you're saying is that you can't really use it as a deposit. Right? And in fact,
you could, but it's not the whole amount. You cannot decide that I want to put 100,000 into account 3.
Sure, but I mean, effectively, that's not a deposit anymore. If you only get 10%.
Yeah, well, 10% of whatever you put in goes into account 3. That's what it says on the tin, right?
And in that case, that also means that you can't really opt out per se. You are kind of forced to take the account 3 no matter what.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not know that earlier.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing it up to me.
No, but we covered that, right? It's not a obvious.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe I just forgot. Yeah.
So that's where I think people don't understand in practice what actually happens. Okay, so your normal contributions, monthly contributions, the ones that your employer pays on your behalf, right, which also is partly deducted from your salary, that goes in automatically is broken up into these 3 accounts, right? And 10% of that goes into account 3, right? We've already established that. Now you follow that logic, even if you do voluntary contributions, which is right now the maximum is 100,000 a year, right? You can do an extra 100,000 a year voluntarily. Okay. If you are thinking that, wow, I can put this into account 3 and take it out at any point, no, because only 10% of that is going to go into account 3.
Right.
It is not something that you can decide that, I believe EPF dividend is going to be 5%, so therefore I can use this as a liquid, like a liquid
5%
investment.
Account.
So no, right? It's going to be 10% of your contribution, right?
I get it.
But actually, the flip side is that, so it's okay, right? You can actually, like, whatever you want to put in, 10% of that you actually will be able to use as a liquid account. So the flip side to this is that I think EPF is, I don't know if this is part of their design, but in a way, it creates a form of enticement for people to save a little bit more because they know they can take out a portion of this. But when you do save, 90% of it is locked up, right?
Right.
That serves for your longer term needs. I'm being a bit creative in my interpretation, but so to the first few months where people maybe make this mistake and they put in a certain amount of money thinking that they can take it out, well, 90% of that is going to be locked up in your account 1 and account 2. Right?
But I think also it raises an interesting point that for the people who actually don't want to have an account 3, right? You can actually take whatever is given to you in account 3, put it back in as contribution, and only 10% of whatever you put in from the original account 3 amount will go back to account 3. Which effectively means that you can decide to have everything into a, and you can even like recycle it until it becomes a basis point kind of thing, right?
Okay. So I think on that note, you expect that there will be some people doing some creative stuff, right? So initially, my first instinct was that, wow, okay, this is great. You have another liquid facility, right? But actually, it's not really, right? Because only a small portion of whatever you put in goes into this account 3.
Yeah, and also based on what I just learned from you, it seems like the deposit-taking sector, like the banks and Versa and the like, aren't actually threatened per se by this new account.
That one
right?
I want to challenge a bit. I mean, not challenge.
Sure,
I think
please go
we
ahead.
can. Yeah, okay. So now let's go into the meat of what we want to talk about.
Right.
And before we come to that, why do you think EPF is doing this?
Why do I think EPF is doing this? I think the intention, in principle at least, is to give those who need the cash flow needs to be able to do this, right? So if you think about how, let's say from an economist point of view, normally this would be done through some form of stimulus, right? Or even targeted subsidies, right? If you can allow those with EPF savings to tap their own savings, on one hand, yes, it's not good for your retirement. On the other hand, if you don't make it to retirement, it doesn't matter anyway. So why not let you tap your cash flow? I think in principle, that's what the intention was. Would I be correct to say that?
Yeah, so I think this is where, and the reason I think we want to have this conversation, right, is because I think I sort of referenced this also in our past episode where we also touched about EPF, but mainly that was about the pandemic withdrawals, right? But, I feel like we are expecting too much from EPF.
Okay.
I mean, EPF can only manage the funds that are contributed into it, right?
Right.
They can't really solve a retirement crisis. That's a government problem. Now, of course, EPF is the government, but EPF is, if you really want to think about it, EPF is set up to manage the funds for its members who contribute into it.
Right.
And when you view it from that point of view, they're doing relatively a good job. If you contribute monthly, every month, right, you hold on a steady job, you will be okay at the end of it, right? Provided you have a steady job, every month your employer pays and stuff like that. The compounding interest will provide you with something at the end of it, and in most cases, it will be relatively enough, right?
Sure.
The fact that it's not enough is other structural issues, whether people are not earning high enough or, they're moving in and out of formal employment to informal employment.
So
where
it's
you
not
don't
really EPF's fault.
so it's not really EPF's fault, right?
Yeah.
But because of the role they play, the outsized role they play in being the fund manager to figure out, to take care of people's retirement, it kind of unfairly falls on them to do this, right? So therefore, they had to come up with a creative way. And here's where we are speculating, right? Because we don't know why they've decided to do this. But yeah, so coming to your point is that true, I think we have to realize, we have to accept, we know for a fact there is going to be a retirement crisis. Many people are already living that reality, right? I mean, what can EPF do? They can't. But to those people who are struggling today, they can give them some additional cash, right? You can actually tap into some money today to just maybe sleep a little bit better.
Cash flow, basically.
Yeah, cash flow, right?
But I think also, since this is the Economy Rights podcast and we are talking about economics, let me bring a bit of an ivory tower perspective. Like in the last episode, we actually talked about how EPF withdrawals during the pandemic was a form of unconventional monetary policy, right? Where it substitutes government debt. So since our government debt is already at 66% by the statutory debt definition, there's very limited headroom for government to increase debt further. And whatever they do raise from incremental debt should ideally go towards people who need it more. So which means the lower income folk who may not have as much as EPF savings.
Yeah.
Right? And the EPF savings are a way for the middle income folk who tend to have more in terms of EPF savings to basically stimulate themselves, right?
Yeah.
Without burdening the government.
Yeah.
Of course, you can argue the pros and cons of this, but it's important to recognize that from the government's point of view, their mandate is social stability.
Yeah.
Right. This is a way to really one of the only good options that we have, right? Because as an economist, I can tell you that there's not very many options. So yes, from individual EPF members'
Yeah.
perspective, it may not sound fair.
Yeah.
But you need to see it from a national administration point of view.
Yeah.
Right? This is just one of the few good options we have, right? It's not that they have considered the individual's point of view, right? It's really more of a national kind of strategic purpose.
Yeah. So on that note, just to put this in context, right? So as we've already established, this is going to happen from next month onward. Basically, well, actually this month, right? We're recording this. Today is the 3rd of May, right?
Yes.
Today is the 3rd of May. And according to the press release, this is going to take effect from 11th of May, right? From contributions after 11th of May, which basically means your May contributions. So I'm assuming that also means that after May 11, when you log into your EPF account, you will see these 3 accounts, right? At which point you can decide if you want to transfer some money from account 2 into account 3 as a starting balance.
Right.
And I think what's going to happen, because we know the structure of EPF members, right, where the numbers are always there in terms of the huge member base that don't have enough to retire and all that, right? If I'm not mistaken, now this one I cannot remember off the top of my head, but I think that, forgive me if I'm wrong, but you can go and check. I think if you have about 3,000 and below in your account 2 currently,
Yes.
you will be able to transfer, I think, about 1,000 into account 3.
I think it's all, right?
Or maybe all. Okay?
It's all, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I might be wrong on that, but the point I want to make is that you're probably going to see between May and June a lot of withdrawals,
Right.
and people will have cash to spend during
Yes.
that month, right?
Right.
So and it'll be interesting to see the effects of this, where suddenly you have a lot of people being able to tap on cash that they didn't have,
Right.
just for that short period. And so I think that is coming to your point, right? That the government just has to do something.
Yes, correct. Yeah. Because you got to also remember that we are discussing this account 3 topic in isolation.
Yeah.
But external to this topic, the government also has a mandate to improve the economy.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's one of the biggest complaints that people have.
Yeah.
Right. So they don't have a lot of options, right? I mean, I'm sure you've heard of the Microsoft investment recently.
Yes.
Right. So FDI may be one option, but they need to do a lot.
Yeah, all I want is free Copilot, right?
No, actually, there was. I actually came across a social media post.
Right.
They were saying that when Microsoft comes over, they may allow greater local access to Azure.
Okay.
That's a completely different,
Okay.
separate thing, but might be something to look forward to.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings me to the final part of this, where we get into a little bit more of if I could use the word controversy lah. Okay.
Right.
Okay. This comes to what you were hinting at before in terms of how will other financial institutions
Right.
take to this. So we've already established that there is going to be liquidity. People will be able to tap onto this facility, but it's going to be 10% of your contributions, right?
Okay.
But I still feel there will be some effect on other fund managers, right? And here's my reason why. So prior to this, right, let's establish first, prior to this, you will never be able to tap on EPF. You cannot tap on your money, right? For most practical reasons, you cannot. But even then, and I experience this in my, like when I speak to my clients and all that, even then, people in their mind have always benchmarked investment returns to EPF 5%. Right? And you tell them that, but your benchmarking is something that you cannot tap on. But still, this is human behavior. So they've benchmarked it to EPS 5%, right? So my argument is that now that you can tap into this, albeit it's a smaller amount, this essentially, to me, feels like this is the new risk-free rate.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because now you actually can tap on something that supposedly is going to give you 5%.
Actually, I mean, sorry, let me just digress a little bit, since you brought it up.
Yeah.
It so happens that the 30-year MGS also pays about around the same 5 to 5.5%, right?
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's at least, I think it's around 5 if I'm not wrong.
That is what, 30 years?
30 MGS, which is the proxy for an EPF account. Right?
Okay.
Because you kind of lock in your money.
Yeah.
But the advantage of MGS, and I'm not
Okay,
not trying to.
so just for everyone, this is basically you're talking about bonds, right?
Yes,
Government
sorry.
bonds.
When I
Right?
say MGS, I mean Malaysian government securities. It's basically the US Treasury of Malaysia, right? Or Malaysian government bonds.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to compare, right?
Yeah.
It's actually about the same,
Yeah.
right? The what they're offering.
Yeah.
And I just found that a very interesting observation.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the point, as I want to lay it out, is that prior to this, even though mentally we've all accepted that as the benchmark
Right.
for a good return, it has to be higher than 5%. Otherwise, I might as well just put it in EPF, right?
Right.
This is what people usually will say. Now, for anyone who is offering financial investment products out there, like this 5% is easily achievable based on what we currently understand, right?
Okay.
Right? It is achievable. Because prior to this, the risk-free rate, as I understand it, is really about 3%, which is your FD, right?
Right.
You put in FD, you are guaranteed that. And it is a guarantee, right? Up to 250,000 and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
because
that's
it's an FD.
Yeah, this risk-free. But maybe before we go further, since we like to break down jargons, if you could just explain what risk-free rate is.
Okay, so a risk-free rate, as the name implies, is risk-free.
Yeah.
Of course, nothing is truly risk-free. Even the Malaysian government can go bankrupt.
Yeah.
As a lot of people seem to think is going to happen. But it is as close to risk-free as possible. So in finance or in economics, we basically assume that the government debt is risk-free. So the global risk-free rate is usually the US Treasury, the policy rate, right? Like what the Fed sets, which is currently at 5.2 or is it 5.5, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is the benchmark that we use for all other loans, all other bonds, right? So you have a risk-free rate to start with, and then let's say you have a higher risk bond. So let's say a mortgage loan, right? Then you add a premium to it. So that's where the BLR plus comes from.
Yeah.
Right? The base lending rate plus. And it's a bit like the old LIBOR days, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the principle of it.
Okay, so the way I think about this from a layman's perspective, right, is that the risk-free rate is basically the return you get for doing nothing, right? You shake legs, this is what you get, right?
Yeah.
In a very simple formula, right? But to my argument just now, I feel like with this new facility, right, if you think about it as a facility, right, it feels like this is now the new risk-free rate,
Right.
which is no longer just a mental benchmark, because prior to this, there's a mental benchmark, but you cannot actually get it.
Right.
Now is that you potentially could actually get this, right, and it's liquid, right?
Okay, I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it's not actually a risk-free rate because you can't actually deposit, right? Treat it like a deposit account.
Yeah, I mean, not in the topical sense, but you could be a bit creative about it, right? You could do self-contribution, but as we established, only 10% of that.
Okay,
goes
again,
into
I'm
this,
not pushing back. I'm just trying to clarify.
Yeah.
But because if you put it in and you get split 90% into illiquid accounts, that's effectively a 30-year loan to EPF, right?
Yes.
So would that really consider as risk-free rate?
So I think, my point is that I feel that because everyone is going to be testing things out for a while, right? As we've also seen that people are like having different interpretations of this.
I'm going to be interested in what financial products are created from this.
I feel that people are going to try and put money in there in the hopes that they will be able to tap on it at any point at this 5%, right? At least that is even what some of the chatter is right now, which is why I wanted to make the point that actually you are only 10% of whatever you contribute, even self-contribution goes to this.
Okay.
But anyway, my bigger question is, like, do you think this will influence other fund managers? Like, for example, whether some of your financial apps or even like your bigger funds and stuff like that, even your banks, right? Whether like savings rates will go up. Say, for example, GXS Bank, right? They currently still have a 3%, right?
Yes.
This 3% there is no time limit.
Isn't 3% the regular rate?
No, but savings. But it is savings.
Oh, right.
It is savings account, deposit savings, right?
Yeah, just tells you I'm not a customer.
Yeah. And other banks also, so like Al-Rajhi Rise, I think they also do about.
It's a 5% thing, but it's promo, right?
But those are promos, right?
Yeah,
for a time limit. But as far as I can tell, GSX Bank is not time limited.
Right.
So it's 3% per annum. The question is whether this will force any of our banks or financial fund managers to react to it, or they are the smarter ones and they know that actually there might be excitement for a while, but then people will suddenly realize that actually you can't really tap into this country so easily.
Yeah, I think it's more of the latter, right? Because the fact that it's not actually a deposit, right? Anything you contribute, 90% of it goes to 1 and 2.
Yeah.
That or in itself is already saying that it's not a liquid account.
Yeah.
So I don't think it is going to really impact, the market per se, right? Because, or let's call it the money markets.
Yeah.
Right? Because you are basically comparing FD with the private sector and EPF's 30-year
Yeah.
lock-in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just imagine if public bank gave you a 30-year FD, you probably would just not care, right?
Yeah.
For 5%.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to be like a direct competition.
Okay. Yeah. I guess ultimately everyone's going to be reacting to this in different ways. Like we can't really anticipate, right? Just again, if you look at all the comments and all that, I think different people have different views of this.
Yep.
But I think also it seems to be informing very different behaviors, how people are looking at this.
Right.
And I just want to make a point very interestingly, right? So if you go to, there was a YouTube episode or YouTube clip by Financial Faiz. He looked at the behavior during the pandemic withdrawals. And the trend was that a lot of the Chinese actually invested even more during that time, right?
Okay.
Whereas a lot of the withdrawals were mostly from Bumiputra, right?
Yeah, right.
And that was his assessment.
Right.
The point I'm simply making is that whenever you introduce this sort of new, let's call it products, right?
Right.
It's probably not the best term, but you're going to have different behaviors among people. I think you can't really anticipate what it's going to be. Some people might misinterpret what they're actually getting.
Yeah.
And that might force them to make certain actions that then they realize actually it's not what they thought it was, right?
Basically, unintended consequences.
Yeah, unintended consequences.
Yeah.
But just to cap this off, I think the most I just want to come back to this very big picture, right? In terms of EPF putting this in place, moving forward, all of us will get this facility, right?
Right.
And I feel that the easiest way for me to reconcile this is that if you just carry on doing as you were, and every month you make a contribution, you hold down a steady job, but at the end of the year, if suddenly you need to buy a good Christmas present, whatever, you will actually be able to tap on this account, right? If you needed some liquidity, right? So
yeah. No, I think it also circles back to what you were saying, right? The actual retirement component of EPF, which is account 1, is actually increased.
Yes.
So if your concern is lack of retirement for savings, you don't have to actually worry about it. It's actually better for you. What you really need to worry or compromise on is your ability to buy a house or go for a master's program, which is where it comes from account 2.
Yes.
Right? That one is the one that's truly reduced in favor of account 3.
Yeah.
And notably, if you want to not opt in per se, you can just take account 3, put it back into account 1 and 2, right? With the voluntary contribution.
Yeah.
And then
Yes.
okay, so let's say, right, for simplicity's sake, you get $100 normally, right? And that gets split 75 to account 1, 15 to account 2, and 10 to account 3.
Yeah.
So you take a 10, you put it back into account 1, into
Another
EPF,
10 of
right?
10
so
of 10,
9 will go back to account 1 and 2, right? And then you do it again. Effectively, you can create your own account 1 and 2 as if it didn't matter, right?
So therefore, for people in EPF, I guess maybe whether they've thought about this or not, I wonder if there's a minimum contribution that you can make. No, actually, I think there is, because there's a maximum 100,000. If I'm not mistaken, a minimum is
true. I mean, of course, for the people who nitpick on 1%, 2% missing out yields, right? Of course, it will matter. But for the vast majority of people who don't care about such small numbers, such small losses, right? I don't think it really matters, They actually give you an out if you want. It's just not explicitly stated.
Yes. Okay. I think we should leave it at that. So there's some room for creativity.
Right. So then now we have some Q&A from a very loyal listener. Thank you very much for your questions, and we hope that this will satisfactorily address your concerns. Right. Okay, so I'm reading it through here. While withdrawals from account 2 is meant for healthcare, insurance, and education, so this is what the original intention of account 2 was, right? For you to make really life-changing kind of purchases. How do you think people will spend money from the account 3 withdrawals? I mean, quite frankly, I think we all know how it's going to be spent, right? Because remember, the intention of this is cash flow, right? If you are, a middle income cohort and you have a stable job, this may come across as a compromise. But you got to remember, there are a lot of people out there who are currently suffering. Right? Just to give you a bit of a benchmark, the average household income of the country, right? The median is about 6,600 per month.
Household,
and that's 2 adults and possibly at least 1 kid, right? So it's not a lot. Right? Most urbanites will probably earn that by themselves. So this account tree is meant to cater to them, right? Even if they don't have a lot in EPF savings, they probably at least have 3,000, you know?
Yeah.
So it's really meant to help them. Can you share which sectors of the economy will benefit from spending from account tree? Okay, I can't do that because that would be investment advice. I'm really sorry. Okay.
Then, okay.
Right. Okay. But you can guess, like, you know, right? I mean, what will people spend their money on, you know? Okay. Instead of introducing account tree, why not just reduce the contribution from employer and employee for a specific time period? Okay, actually, this raises a good point, right? Instead of introducing the account tree, right, why not just reduce the contribution from employer and employee for a specific time period? Because if you think about it, right, do you want to do the honors of explaining?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, if you really think about it, right, what this account tree withdrawals effectively do is it reduces the contribution from the employer and employee. Right? Think about it, right?
Yes.
Because it's like the employer gives you that part of that 11%. So quite 10% plus 1%.
Yeah.
And then you give yourself part of that 11% that you contribute. Right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what it's functionally achieving. I think you have the right idea, and I don't think this is also something that not a lot of people know.
Yeah.
Right. So it's quite obvious, lah.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I think it answers itself as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's one way of looking at it for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you just got to think about, you know, the incentives.
But to that question, I think it's like it's going to be harder to tell the employers to give that money directly to the employees, so they do it through this mechanism.
But if I recall right, about I think 5 years ago, there was this voluntary reduction from 11 to 8, right? Something like that.
That was during the pandemic.
Why did they do that? Do you remember the reason?
I think it was to help SMEs, right? Because to preserve cash. Because when your voluntary comes down, basically you pay less, right?
Right.
So the rate came down. I know. So at that point, I had staff as well.
But I recall that employees had to voluntarily allow the employer to do that, right? It wasn't something employer could force.
You had to, our favorite keyword for today, opt in.
Okay. So why would employees do that? I mean, can you remember?
No, was it employees or employers? I think
employee was allowed to choose because I was allowed to choose.
So it's the same effect, like, so you keep more cash, right? You keep more of your salary if you contribute less.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
So it's the same effect. Yeah.
So is that correct? Still correct to say that we contribute 11%, like on a portfolio average basis?
No, but after that it went back up.
Okay, sure.
It was reinstituted to the normal rate.
Okay.
I think it was for maybe a 1 year period, if I'm not mistaken, where you reduce the rate. Yeah.
So I'm an economist, but my personal finance, I also don't care. All right. So next question: with easier access to EPF savings, will the middle income group who might prioritize short-term ones over retirement needs be less likely to develop a strong savings culture? Okay. You have any feelings on that?
I think this goes back to different people and their different strategies and behavior. I think it's all about behavior. Right. Some people will take this money, as what we've seen even during the pandemic withdrawals. Right. They take this money and then they put it in higher yields.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, okay, so let me try and answer it from a more ivory tower view. On one hand, it's true that, don't get me wrong, I'm not discounting your view. I'm just saying that from the technical standpoint, right? On one hand, it's true that responsible people will probably suffer. On the other hand, if you look at a really broad basis, right, the reality is that most people aren't good at personal finance. Right? And we're not talking about lower income either. We're talking about middle income people. Right? They are just not very good in the first place. So I don't really see how this would really change things a lot. And
I think the indicator of that is the debt ratio, right? Very high debt ratios. I mean, basically...
Actually, no lah.
But wouldn't you say that one of the big issues, I mean, this slightly going off topic, but one of the big issues is that the high like credit card debts, the funding of lifestyle through debts and stuff like that, right? That is basically behaviors, right?
Okay, so it depends. If you're comparing to an utopian ideal, yes, right? If you're comparing to even like the US, right, consumer,
right.
I don't think we're doing much worse than them in terms of responsibility, you know?
Yeah. Well, this was the episode where we established that everyone owes the bank a MyV, right?
Which is not too bad, right, actually, if you really think about it.
Yeah.
But in the future episode, we can talk about like statutory debt limit and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. And lastly, the final question.
All right.
How can we leverage this new flexibility to educate EPF members about responsible saving strategies and the importance of a long-term retirement plan? If they don't save enough, won't it be a burden on public funds? So again, right, it goes back to the earlier question as well. I don't think it really changes anything much. So if you are worried about how it burdens public funds, it doesn't really change a lot.
Yeah.
People are already kind of not very responsible to begin with.
Yeah.
Right. So we are not starting from some utopian ideal and then regressing. We are already regressed.
Yeah.
And then just regressing a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, I don't think it changes much. And when you weigh against the pros of giving those who need it the cash flow to survive a little while longer, I think it kind of outweighs that.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I think the question also was asking about what it means in terms of retirement, right? But I think that is not a concern because in fact, actually, the EPF is doing that for you, and now it's going to do more by another 5%.
Right.
So I think if I may, right, if anyone is worried about what this means for your retirement, in fact, it is not. It's actually going to be doing better for your retirement. Provided we've established what retirement here really means. Retirement really means like a horizon later on, right? Like depending on your age, maybe the next 20 years and stuff like that. Regardless of this account tree, you are going to be better off.
Right. So let me pair it back to you.
Yeah.
Does it mean that with this new development of a country, our retirement situation is actually better than before?
Well, I mean, the only way to answer that is going to accumulate faster, lah.
All right.
You know what I mean? Everyone is going to benefit from higher accumulation.
Right.
Okay. And 5% is significant, you know. I mean, if you have like 20 years, it's significant on a monthly basis.
Okay.
Right? Don't you think so?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Okay. So does that mean that with this new account tree and with our account one contribution going up from 70% to 75%, from a retirement funding standpoint, we are actually better off than before?
Yeah.
Wow, that's surprising.
I mean it's but this is basic maths, right? Because regardless of what you get to withdraw from account 3, in this case, if the question is specifically about retirement, right? And a lot of this people are thinking about what is it going to do for retirement. No, especially about retirement, you are getting higher accumulation. That's it.
Right. That means the thing we were already compromising on, as we said earlier, was our education fund as well as our house fund. And to be fair, you shouldn't be really using your retirement fund in the first place.
Yes.
Right. So if you are really complaining about that, maybe buy less house.
So EPF is doing a favor for you.
Yeah. Okay, I think with that, we have pretty much covered a lot of the concerns that the everyday man is concerned about.
Yeah.
And if you're feeling angry about this, we hope we have helped you feel a bit less angry.
And even if you still are, it's too bad, as we've covered.
No, let's be clear.
There's nothing you can do.
We need to.
There's nothing you can do. It's not an opt-in. It's
okay,
there.
I'll take a gentler approach, right?
Okay,
if you're still angry, your feelings are validated. Okay, but unfortunately, practically, you can't really do much about it. Just rest assured that from a retirement funding standpoint, it's actually a net
Better
positive.
Off.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we leave it at that. Thank you so much for your time. I think this was a fun episode. So I think hopefully we've covered some things that are a little bit more valuable. I think it is, if I may say so. I was actually quite frustrated with a lot of the conversations that I was seeing online. That's why I suggested we do this topic.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of the purpose of economy, right?
Yeah.
To bring down complex economic jargon down to the everyday person. And if you have
questions, right? Just leave it in the comments. We're happy to get questions. We will definitely feature it.
And please like and subscribe and follow this channel if you want more of this. We'll see you in the next episode.